Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for attending. Happy Thursday and happy Men's Health Week. We are very excited to be here today for our Metro Plus Health webinar, Prostate Cancer Prevention, Screen Now, Not Later, by our very own Dr. Andrew Weiner. This week is Men's Health Week, as we all know, and as we prepare for Father's Day, that's on Sunday. And so I had the pleasure of meeting someone really fantastic, and his name is Christopher Williams. He is on the call today. And just to give you a little background about Christopher Williams, he is the founder and executive director of Heart, Body, and Soul, Inc. It is a Brooklyn based nonprofit, and he is also the creator of the Black Man's Health Festival, which he launched last year, June 4th, 2022, to focus on Black men's health awareness initiatives. He is also a resident of Brooklyn, and Christopher experienced a number of personal health issues, including two heart attacks and a diagnosis of stage 3 appendiceal cancer, which forever changed his path and redefined his purpose. So I'd like to introduce to you today Mr. Christopher Williams as he gives his personal story in regards to surviving cancer. Christopher?
Thank you so much for having me, Keisha. Thank you very much for giving me this platform. And Dr. Weiner, I look forward to hearing more about what you have to share. So, as you stated, my journey started a few years ago, but I was diagnosed with stage 3 appendiceal cancer in 2021. Followed by that, I had a heart attack in that same year, the following month. I would say the majority of my youth was pretty healthy, but these events that came out of nowhere for me really did change my path. And one of the things that it alerted me to was the importance of understanding the importance of paying attention to everything that happens with my body. Had I been paying closer attention, there were probably a few things that I might not have missed. But this being June being Men's Health Month, it's a priority for me to really stress the importance of wellness and the importance of us as men paying attention to our health and our well-being. And I say, and I focused on Black men primarily because seeing what's happening in our community and the disparities that exist, I think it's imperative, it's critical that we do our part to ensure that Black men in our communities have the tools, have access to the tools and resources they need to get themselves on a better path. I can only imagine the work that Dr. Weiner has to do with regards to prostate cancer and prostate cancer awareness initiatives. But one of the biggest hurdles is getting men to understand, especially men of our community, men of color, to go look past this cultural sort of or social, whatever it is, programming that exists where we have this fear of a prostate cancer exam. We have a fear of getting a finger inserted in our rectum to get an understanding of what's going on. And so, one of the things that I'm working to do is sort of debunk all of this to get people to sort of dehypnotize our men so that they understand that anything to do with your body is something that you should prioritize. It's something that you shouldn't worry about. It's something that you shouldn't have all these different notions in your mind about, but just look at it as you taking care of yourself. One of the things I want to close with is to say, as we go about our daily lives and do the things that we do, we often say that we want to fight against injustice. We want to take care of our families. We want to provide for our families. I want, especially the men on this call, to remember that you cannot fight for or take care of anyone if you don't prioritize taking care of yourself. I did everything I needed to do, and I fought, despite my diagnosis of stage 3 appendiceal cancer, to live because I have a family to take care of. I have people that love me, and mostly I love myself. So I want us to just take that in a little bit and think about why you need to do the things that you have to do to take care of those that you love. And thank you again for this opportunity, Keisha and Dr. Weiner. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for sharing your story. Thank you so much for taking the time out to be with us today. And we really appreciate it and are very happy that you are here, still fighting, and very excited that you are stepping up and taking the initiative to help others. So thank you so much, and happy Father's Day. So now we're going to jump into a quick video for MetroPlus Health.
Work for New York City? Feel ignored by your health plan? Still paying $20 to see your doctor? We can change that. MetroPlus Health Gold gives you no-cost doctor visits, up to $1,000 to work out, no-cost dietitian care, no-cost mental health care, money back for rides to your doctor, and access to over 34,000 providers. Join the health plan made for city employees. Switch to MetroPlus Health Gold.
All right, so now we are going to come to the presentation by the wonderful Dr. Andrew Weiner. And so Dr. Andrew Weiner is a urological oncologist who performed his residency at SUNY Downstate Medical Center, after which he went on to complete a fellowship in urologic oncology at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center. He currently serves as the Chief of Urology at New York City Health and Hospitals, Kings County, and Woodhull Medical Center, and has risen to an appointment at SUNY Downstate Medical Center as Associate Professor and Program Director for the Urology Residency. Dr. Weiner's clinical interests feature the treatment of urological malignancies, which also being able to study the impact of cancer in an underserved population. He is also passionate about providing mentorship for the next generation of physicians and urologists, and thus serves as clinical advisory dean for medical students at SUNY Downstate Medical School. Well, that's all Brooklyn, so I'm very excited and very happy to introduce to you Dr. Andrew Weiner.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much, Keisha, for that very warm and extremely thoughtful welcome. I also, as Mr. Williams mentioned, I also live in Brooklyn, so you may hear some of the subways from time to time. So yeah, I live in Brooklyn by choice, as Jackie Robinson once said. So I just want to take a moment to just comment on what Christopher said earlier. I think that his story is extremely inspirational, and thank you so much for sharing that. Somebody once told me that self-care does not mean that it's selfish. So self-care is not equal to selfish. And you're right. If you're 6 feet underground, you can't do anything for anybody else around you. So one of the themes throughout this discussion is going to be just basically knowing your numbers and empowering yourself to make decisions. It doesn't mean you have to do one thing or the other, but if you don't know, then you don't have the ability to make decisions. So information and knowledge and education empower you and your family to help make decisions. So this talk is going to be relatively short. I like to give you some information about prostate cancer and some of the things that I know. Obviously, prostate cancer is a massive topic and requires long-term career investments to understand intricacies, and we're constantly learning newer and greater technology and improvements and interventions, et cetera. But I'm going to try and give you a brief overview about some of the screening, what we know now, and some of the stuff coming down the pike in the future. And then I'm going to leave plenty of time for question and answer, because I find that that's the most interesting part, actually, is hearing what some of maybe the fallacies are, some of the questions you may have out there. And this talk is not geared towards men only. This talk is geared towards women who have men in their lives, husbands, uncles, brothers, sons, anything. And to bring that information back to the family member in order to keep them safe and healthy. So without further ado, let's go to the next slide. So let's start off with what the prostate is. So the prostate is an organ that sits beneath the bladder. So I don't have access to the pointer here, but you can see the round structure in the middle. Can you guys see my pointer or no? Oh yeah, exactly. So that hollow organ, that's the bladder, and just beneath it is a walnut-sized organ called the prostate. And the prostate is important in that it helps liquefy. It produces an enzyme called PSA, which we'll hear about later, that actually turns the seminal fluid, which is made in the seminal vesicles. It turns it from a thick toothpaste-like paste into a liquid that can actually inseminate a woman and then get a woman pregnant. So after the ages of fertility and beyond, when you're interested in having children, the prostate really serves zero benefit. It only causes trouble. And so you may hear of things like BPH or other urinary issues, going to the bathroom too frequently, waking up at night, the urine stream slowing down, or even going into urinary retention. Well, that's because the prostate grows as we get older, and it can lead to a whole slew of urinary issues. And that is distinct from prostate cancer. So you'll see that the urethra, the P-tube, colloquially known as the P-tube, the urethra runs directly through the middle of the prostate. But the area where prostate cancer develops is actually where this dotted line is pointed to in the top picture. It's around the outside, the periphery of the prostate. So it's called the peripheral zone. And this is why you can feel for some prostate cancers when you do a digital rectal exam or sticking a finger up the butt, which is no fun for anybody, right? Doctors don't want to do it. Patients don't want to get it. But as Christopher mentioned, it's absolutely essential. And so this is why doctors do it, is because the area where the prostate cancer develops happens to be located actually in an accessible location through the rectum. So the bad news about prostate cancer is that it is the second most common type of cancer in men in the US after skin cancer. It occurs in African Americans more commonly than white men, about 2 to 3 times more likely. And African Americans more likely to die, about 2 to 3 times more likely to die from prostate cancer than white men. The reason for that is not exactly known right now. It's thought to be a whole constellation of reasons. We are learning more and more every day about our genome and something called our epigenome. And the epigenome are things that surround your DNA and your genetic material that affect the ability of it to open up or close. And when it's closed, it's protected. And when it's opened up, it's vulnerable to insults. UV radiation, smoking, all these things can increase the risk. But there's also a genetic component, and we're starting to notice more and more that there is a dietary component. So this is going to be an area of intense interest in the future, but we don't know exactly why there's a propensity in African Americans over white men right now. So the good news is that prostate cancer usually grows quite slowly. So it's not one size fits all for prostate cancer. We grade prostate cancer from a 1 to a 5, 5 being the most aggressive, 1 being the least aggressive. And if you have a 1, 2, 3, these things tend to develop very slowly. We're talking years, decades even. And in the case of grade group 1 prostate cancer, which is the most non-aggressive type, these can actually stay dormant and never change. And so most prostate cancer, we say, grows very slowly and can oftentimes even just be observed. And most men with prostate cancer are diagnosed after the age of 65. And so as you can imagine, a slow-growing cancer after the age of 65, you start talking about competing risks, okay? We use the term, is going to outrun this thing, meaning will likely die from something else other than prostate cancer. And I have an interesting fact, actually. There was an autopsy study done on several thousand men and at different decades of life. And men over the age of 80 had about a 40 to 50% chance of having some sort of prostate cancer in their prostate and they were never diagnosed, meaning that most men will develop prostate cancer if they live long enough. So let's talk about some things that are new in prostate cancer detection and treatment. So maybe not so new, but maybe new to this group. So we talk about prevention, early detection, diagnosis, staging, and treatment. And we hope that we never get to the diagnosis, staging, and treatment, right? We want to prevent and early detect so that we can eliminate the other things. So some of the strategies that I'd like to first talk about are nutrition and lifestyle changes. So we say that anything that's good for the heart is good for your prostate. And this goes back to what I was talking about, this epigenome. So things like high fat, high salt, high protein diets, they tend to impact the way the DNA is coiled up. And so if you're very heavy in fat and other unhealthy type of foods or processed foods, it can create insults to the DNA based on the protecting agents that surround your DNA. So balanced diet, things like fruits and vegetables, provide a much more significant benefit than taking things like dietary supplements that you'll find at GNC or other supplement stores. And frankly, those are extremely expensive and have not been in large cohort studies shown to be particularly beneficial. So some other things that you may hear about in Google or just sort of lay newspapers or whatever. I'm going to go through a couple of supplements that have been discussed, and I'll tell you kind of where things stand on them. So vitamin D supplementation. So high levels of vitamin D have actually been correlated with a lower risk of advanced prostate cancer, but the data is extremely conflicting. So it's not recommended to be on a daily vitamin D supplement. There is one group of men that I would recommend vitamin D supplementation for, and that's men with metastatic prostate cancer, meaning the disease has spread to other parts of the body. And the reason for that is because prostate cancer has a predilection or a propensity for going to the bone, and vitamin D will help create bone strength. And so it doesn't prevent prostate cancer, but it can maintain a man's bone strength or bone density if they are diagnosed with metastatic prostate cancer. So the general multivitamin. So we looked at greater than 7. Prostate cancer researchers have looked at men who take more than 7 tablets per week, and it actually increased the risk of developing prostate cancer. So it actually may be detrimental in some ways, at least in high amounts. And then aspirin has been studied in many different types of cancers, and it's been loosely shown, sort of very, very loosely shown, to maybe decrease the risk of getting and dying from prostate cancer. So daily aspirin we recommend for cardio protection or heart protection, and some may recommend it for prostate cancer prevention. But in my opinion, that the data is so conflicting that it's not worth the risk of being on a daily aspirin unless your cardiologist or your primary care doctor recommends it for your heart. So how do we detect prostate cancer? There's really 2 main components for detecting prostate cancer. And this comes from very simple, straightforward things that your primary care doctor can do and should be doing. The first one, and I should reverse this, I'm going to talk about the digital rectal exam. We talked about how prostate cancer develops in the peripheral zone, the outside zone of the prostate, which is right next to the rectum. And so you can feel for any major lumps or bumps in the prostate that may suggest an underlying malignancy. But the second and really the most effective way of screening for prostate cancer, it's not for diagnosis, is the use of a serum or blood test called the PSA, the prostate specific antigen. And it's a protein that's made by the prostate and only the prostate. And as I mentioned, it's an enzyme that will liquefy the semen so that it's a looser liquid and that can actually inseminate a female. So if you don't have this, it's basically like a paste. But as I said, after fertility ages, the PSA is released into the bloodstream, and it's just a way for us to detect the activity or growth rate of the prostate tissue. Now, why is that not the perfect screening tool if it's only made by the prostate? And the reason is that it can be elevated in a man who has just an enlarged prostate. He would kill me, but I'm going to tell you anyway, because he gave me permission. But my dad's prostate is very large, and he has some urinary issues. He's on some medication for it. And his PSA is also way above what we would call normal. So we say normal is less than 4. And I put that in quotes because it's different by race and by ethnicity and also by age. So your PSA normal range will change as you get older. But his is way off the charts either way. So he's undergone multiple biopsies, which we'll talk about, but his PSA has been found to be not cancer related, but rather just from benign enlargement of his prostate. It was actually one of the reasons why I went into urology and studied prostate cancer, because we had so many scares with this when I was growing up. So I want to talk about the PSA controversy for a bit, because as primary care physicians and also lay people, you can see, keep clicking through some of these headlines, and one more. You can see New York Times, PBS, Wall Street Journal. It was all over the news when the United States Preventative Services Task Force in 2012 downgraded PSA screening from a grade A and B to a grade D, which tells doctors not to screen for prostate cancer. And the reason is because when PSA came out in 1988, everybody started getting screened, everybody started getting biopsied, and we were detecting prostate cancer even in its very early phases and treating it extremely aggressively. And over the last 20 years, we've really identified how to use the PSA much more effectively. And so they put together this task force that was run by a radiologist and a pediatrician, neither of which will ever see a prostate patient or anybody who's even screening for prostate. And they evaluated some very outdated studies, and they came out with this recommendation. Well, in subsequent years, we saw a spike in metastatic prostate cancer patients, and then they reevaluated it in 2017, and they reestablished a new recommendation, which upgraded it to a grade C. So I want to go through what the American Cancer Society recommends as guidelines for PSA screening by age group. So the average risk male, men who has at least 10 years to live and has 0 risk factors for prostate cancer, should start screening at the age of 50. And after the age of 70, it's recommended that they stop screening. But at the age of 50, it should be the first time that an average risk person gets screened. Now, pretty much every single patient in my practice is technically a high-risk male. And the reason for that is because just by being African-American, you're automatically at risk. So for every African-American on the line or that you know, they should be starting their screening at age 45 with a one-time PSA. And if that PSA is less than 1, then you can wait a few years. Sometimes you can even wait 5 years if it's really low. If it's less than 0.5, you can wait till 50 to resume screening. But again, this is just a blood test. And so again, the risk factors include African-American, or if you have a first-degree relative, a father or a brother, diagnosed with prostate cancer under the age of 65. And then you can see men with extremely high risk. Those are, multiple, or one first-degree relative who had prostate cancer at a very early age, and multiple of these risk factors. So again, I want to impart that message. It's a blood test that would be ordered by your primary care physician, and it should start early. This is how we catch prostate cancer in its early phases. So if the prostate-specific antigen, the PSA, is elevated, the next step in diagnosis is an ultrasound-guided biopsy. Before we do the biopsy, we will get an MRI. And the MRI is like our GPS, if you will. So it helps guide our needle. If you can see the top MRI picture, it has some arrows pointing to a dark lesion. That's where I want to hit that. That's the prostate cancer lesion potentially. And so I use the MRI, and you can see down the cartoon below, it's almost like a video game. You want to target that lesion and hit the area of interest while also sampling the rest of the prostate. So typically it's done transrectally. It's a 5 to 10 minute procedure done in the office. We typically give a lot of local numbing medicine. The most uncomfortable part is obviously the ultrasound probe going in the rectum. A number of urologists are starting to do this transperineal, which is the skin in between the men's scrotum and the rectum, but that requires sedation or going to sleep. So if a man is diagnosed with prostate cancer, then you have to do what's called staging. So then you'll get an MRI, again, to see a more broadened MRI to see the pelvis, and you'll usually get a CAT scan of the abdomen and the pelvis, as well as a bone scan for the reason that I mentioned before, which is that prostate cancer has a propensity to land inside the bones. And you can see the skeleton, that's what a bone scan looks like. And those dark areas are areas of prostate cancer that have landed in the axial skeleton, as well as the shoulder and the rib cage. So a few words on treatment. Treatment is wholly and entirely variable, and it totally depends on what type of prostate cancer you have, what grade prostate cancer you have, and what stage prostate cancer you have. So as I mentioned, it's graded 1 through 5, 5 being the worst, 1 being the best. If you have a grade 1 or a very low volume grade 2, you can consider active surveillance. If you have localized prostate cancer in any form, grade 2 through 5, surgery or radiation are options. And then there are some experimental therapies. They're called focal therapies, like high intensity frequency ultrasound, that's HIFU, or cryoablation, which is freezing the prostate. And they all have their side effects, and they're different. So active surveillance, as I mentioned, for low grade, but if you're considering surgery, the gold standard for surgery these days is the Da Vinci robotic surgery. So robotic surgery is something that I do. It's something that I'm passionate about. It offers patients the ability to have surgery with less bleeding, less pain, shorter hospital stay. They either go home the same day or the next day, the next morning. You don't have to have this, big open surgical incision like we used to have to do. And the patients generally have better outcomes in terms of erectile function and urinary function. So some of the advantages I mentioned: less pain, less blood loss, shorter hospital stay. You can visualize the prostate better, and it's a little bit easier on the surgeon because you're not standing over the patient, retracting everything. You're sitting comfortably at a chair. But obviously some of the disadvantages: it requires the Da Vinci robot, which is a $2.5 million piece of equipment, which we have at both Woodhull and Kings County. It can be longer OR times in the early goings for patients, although, mine have been considerably shorter now that I've become more efficient and proficient. And then the most important thing, next click, is that both robotic surgery and open surgery have equivalent oncologic and functional outcomes. What does that mean? It means that they have good, the same cancer control if you do it open or robotically. So you always want to make sure that any new technology has the same ability to control the cancer as the traditional approach, if not better. And I will tell you, in my experience and others, the functional outcomes are better. And functional outcomes after prostate surgery are things like erectile dysfunction and urinary incontinence requiring diapers for a short period of time. The other option for prostate cancer treatment is radiation. And the two main forms of radiation are either brachytherapy or external beam radiation. Brachytherapy is where you place radioactive seeds or pellets inside the prostate at different zones, and they emit radiation and they overlap such that it kills all of the prostate cells. Now, it's a little bit less precise, as you can imagine, than doing surgery, because you can't control exactly where that radiation is going. And so you can get some damage to the surrounding tissue, which can cause some bleeding from the bladder, bleeding from the rectum, and some urinary issues afterwards. But it's generally well tolerated. And you see there's different rings around the prostate. Those indicate the degree of radiation. So it's very hot. The red is very hot right inside the prostate, and the blue and yellow and green are very, they're quiet in terms of their radiation exposure. And this is a different form of radiation. This is called external beam radiation. You might hear about things like CyberKnife or IMRT, intensity modulated radiation therapy. So these are just different ways to deliver radiation. So the patient lays on the bed, and then this machine circumferentially surrounds the patient and delivers the beams. And they all the beams cross and land on the prostate, so that the prostate gets the hottest intensity radiation. And then the zones that are green and yellow, again, are very low intensity radiation. So I want to finish with just, again, some heartfelt words, similar to what our friend Chris said before. The key is self-care and following with your doctors and empowering yourself by knowing your numbers. If you know your numbers, you have the ability to decide what you want to embark on. Is it going to be a biopsy? If the biopsy is positive, do you want to do radiation or surgery? Or, do you not want to do any of it? It's up to you. But if you don't know, then you don't have the ability to make that decision. So I want to part and finish this talk by just saying, talk with your doctor and know your numbers, particularly with regards to PSA in my case. And with that, I will end and open up the line for any and all questions.
Well, Dr. Weiner, thank you so very much. The presentation was very informative. You broke it down in layman's terms so we could all understand. And so thank you so very much for your valuable time and all of the hard work that you do. I'll start. Please feel free, though, if you'd like to unmute and ask a question. This is the time. Very rarely do you have a chance to speak with a doctor and ask your questions. And this is a time to have an intimate conversation with a great doctor. And so I'd like to start off with saying, for me, do you have any advice or any suggestions on how to even approach the subject of, dad or husband or brother or uncle? Have you had a screening, or, have you been to your doctor? How would you even start that conversation? Any suggestions or any comments or, any advice?
Yeah, thanks so much, Keisha. And it's a really important question because sometimes it can be daunting. I mean, we don't all live with our family or right next to our family. So maybe you're seeing them once in a while or talking once a week. And so you want to maximize your time with your family, and don't always want to spend your time talking about medical problems and so on and so forth, but they're really critical. And so I would start by asking about family history, getting to know what the lineage looks like. Hey, Dad, any family members that you know of that have had prostate cancer? I heard this talk on prostate cancer, and I heard that a family history increases your risk. No family history. Oh, okay. Well, do you know if your doctors talk to you about screening for this? Have there been any blood tests drawn? Have they ever tried to do that funny thing where they stick their finger up your, you can make a little bit joke at it. Urologists tend to have the best sense of humor. And it's one of the reasons I initially I fell in love with it, is because they're generally easygoing, lighthearted folks. So, you can kind of make it funny, and then just kind of say, it'd be really great if we could find out what your numbers are, so that we can help, empower us and make a decision.
Great. Thank you so very much. So we do have a question in the chat, and the question is, can you please speak more on the dietary component to prostate cancer?
So again, the link is not extremely well established, and we don't know precisely what types of foods, but we're seeing more and more that highly processed foods, so foods that have a lot of these chemical components that are, that have preservatives, they tend to increase the risk of all cancer types, prostate included. So first and foremost, if you're going to do anything, try and eliminate the number of processed food items that you eat, and eating whole food items, just even if it's a less healthy, even if it's a stick of butter, it's better than something that's laden with chemicals. I mean, I'm not promoting eating a stick of butter, but it's even refined sugar, or instead of using sugar, you can use natural products like honey or maple syrup. So eliminating things that are highly processed is really important first step. And then the second step is eating more lean meats like turkey, chicken, fish is really great. And then lots of fruits and vegetables.
Great. Thank you so very much. So do we have any other questions?
Dr. Weiner, what's the recommended age if there's no history of prostate cancer in your family? What's the recommended age to get screened? And do you recommend, should that first screening be a rectal exam as opposed to a PSA?
For African American men with no family history, the first PSA should be drawn at 45. And you can elect to omit the DRE, the digital rectal exam. That's fine. Honestly, it's the PSA that will drive most everything for me. It helps get a sense as to how large the prostate is and if there's something more concerning. So it adds a layer of detail. But truthfully, I derive my decision on biopsy or not based on PSA and then subsequent MRI. But 45 should be your first one. And it could just be, hey, doc, can we add that to my, routine panel of blood tests that you get?
And so we have another question in the chat, which is, should an African American male be screened annually for a PSA?
Yes. Yep. Again, if at the age of 45, it's less than 1, your risk of developing prostate cancer or clinically significant prostate cancer is extremely low within the next 5 to 10 years. So you can start the annual screening at the age of 50. But that first detection, I've seen, unfortunately, I've seen too many cases of young, in their 40s and early 50s men with metastatic, uncurable, lethal prostate cancer, which could have been prevented and picked up earlier had they gotten early screening. So a PSA of less than 4, as I mentioned, is what's going to come onto your labs as normal. But really, a male at the age of 45 who's got a PSA of 3.5 is not normal. So, that's something, again, it's age adjusted. So, it's really important to get that first screening done at 45 so that you can, again, be empowered and make decisions based on that. But you can screen, you would definitely want to screen annually after the age of 50.
Okay, thank you so very much. And do we have any more questions?
A question that I got in the past at a previous outreach talk that I thought was interesting, because sometimes people are maybe a little bit shy to ask, for partners of men with prostate cancer, I've been asked if it's transmissible. Is it sort of contagious in any way? Would it prevent me from having sexual intercourse with my husband if he's diagnosed with prostate cancer? And the answer is definitely not. Definitely not. There is zero evidence that it's secreted into the seminal fluid, and there is zero risk of developing any sort of cervical cancer or vulvar cancer or female cancers after, with intercourse.
That actually is a very good question, and it makes sense. Okay, so we do have another question, which is, does any research say get tested younger than 40?
So that's a great question. And the answer is you don't want to over test. right? So there's going to be that one case in 500 million that develops, before the age of 40. But honestly, you're going to have too many false positives. And a false positive means that there's going to be a slight elevation that shouldn't have been detected at that time, that would have just gone down, that leads you down a path of, tests and biopsies that you really, shouldn't be going down. So really nothing before 40 is recommended.
For you, Dr. Weiner, I would like to say, because you see so many patients, and I'm really excited and proud and happy that you are in Brooklyn at both Woodhull Hospital, right in Bushwick on Broadway, and of course the wonderful Kings County on Clarkson Avenue in the Flatbush area of Brooklyn. Is there anything that, if you could, or if you were able to maybe let your patients know beforehand, or any advice you would give? Please feel free. And then the second part of the question is, if you are still open to taking patients, would you be okay with sharing information so that someone can either set up an appointment for someone in their life, or come to you directly?
Thank you. I have to say I'm extremely proud of the work that we do at Woodhull and Kings County. Having trained on Clarkson Avenue, and then left and gone to the Upper East Side, it was a no-brainer for me to come back home to Clarkson Avenue. I couldn't wait. I got what I needed out of Memorial Sloan Kettering, but it was like coming home, So I'm extremely proud to be working there, and I love the patients and so gracious. But I will say that the one thing that I would like to tell, the men in our community, and the women too, to impart this on the men, is to just understand that there is no shame in diagnoses, that it doesn't make you less of a man. It doesn't make you any, less capable in the community. It doesn't, you are fallible. We are all fallible. And the one thing is that your community, it needs you, as Christopher mentioned earlier, and your family needs you, and it behooves you to not just, this is not prostate related. Mental health is real. Mental health problems are real. Colon cancer screening, cardiac issues, diabetes, hypertension. These are silent killers. And so just being in tune with your body and seeking medical care, just having a good relationship with your doctor, that's really what I would love to see in our community.
Just had a quick question, Dr. Weiner. When you just hit on something, and I wanted to know if this is something that is being done or with Woodhull and Kings County, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. When patients come in and they have received the diagnosis that they have prostate cancer and have to go through the process of getting treated, so forth, are there alternate services provided for mental health so they can manage and process the things that they're dealing with? And I know firsthand, being a cancer patient and two-time heart attack survivor, I needed that therapy to help me sort of balance things out.
I will tell you, it is something that we frankly stink at in the medical community. We have way too few therapists available. Mental health is rampant right now. I can tell you, my wife, she works in an ICU, and I think that even the providers need some mental health support, just dealing with what they deal with. So I will tell you, it's not as good as it should be, but what I have found to be better than a therapy session are patient advocacy networks. So we have lots of those. So you can speak to either a patient who's about to undergo, has undergone, is a survivor of prostate cancer. And just in talking to some men sort of similar age, you can sort of select who you want to talk to. I found that to be extremely helpful for patients.
Great. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. I would say the first stop, if you want to just start with a prostate screening, is your primary care physician. But again, if you have other urologic issues and or want to just come to me, I'm happy to see you.
Great. Well, thank you once again so very much for all of this wonderful information. Thank you so very much, everyone, for attending. At this time, I'll show a quick MetroPlusHealth video, and then we will have closing remarks from our lovely and one and only Tanya Rand from New York City Health and Hospitals Woodhull.
Said I'm all about it. Yeah, I'm all about it. Said I'm all about it. Yeah, 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 yeah. Said I'm all about it. Yeah, I'm all about it. Said I'm all about it. Yeah, 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 yeah.
At this time, Tanya.
Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of Cheryl Jones, Director of Growth and Planning at NYC HAC Woodhull, we would like to thank Keisha Daniels for partnershiping with us at NYC HAC Woodhull and the opportunity to be part of this webinar on prostate cancer screening. We would also like to express our gratitude to the provider, Dr. Andrew Weiner, MD. It was an honor, doctor. And of course, Paula Edelson, the Deputy Director of Ambulatory Care, Health and Hospital at Woodhull. Also, Woodhull offer a whole lot of entire family practices, which includes adult medicine, asthma, bariatric, cardiology, Center for Cancer Care, disorder, dentistry, neurology, pulmonology, and rehab, to name a few. Also, we have urology, of course, with Dr. Weiner, and to name a few. And we also have mental health. So you can call us at 718-963-8444 for additional information. We are more than happy to help anybody out.
Well, thank you so very much, Tanya. As
More than
always,
welcome.
Woodhull is like family, right?
Yeah.
And once again, to Dr. Andrew Weiner and to Christopher Williams and to Tanya and Cheryl Jones and Woodhull Hospital, and of course, to my MetroPlusHealth family, thank you so very much for your time. I appreciate all of you being here. And as we are in Men's Health Week, Men's Health Month, and as we begin to prepare for a great holiday weekend celebrating manhood, fathers, uncles, brothers, please, let's keep them healthy. Let's work together, and everyone have an absolutely fantastic evening.